Hey everybody, welcome back to Sophisticakes by Mary. So I meant what I said when I said you have to see this. This cake has been in my mind for a few weeks, maybe a month. And full disclosure, this is my second go at it. The first one was unsuccessful, but let me show you how I did this cake through trial and error. So hopefully you can learn from my mistakes what to do and what not to do on how to make this wafer paper wrap cake. So we're going to start by making those abstract flowers. Really, I guess they would be considered more petals. And this is 0 grade wafer paper. I will attach a link on where you can get this. And I am just cutting it into strips. You can do these however big, whatever size, whatever shape you want. I just wanted to go with a basic petal shape in a small to medium size. So just cut these all down into the size you need, and then we'll cut the petals out of these little pieces of paper. Now remember, these do not have to be a real clean, precise petal shape. These are abstract, so if they're not exactly a really clean cut, that's okay, because it's going to warp a little bit when we do this technique on it to get it to have the shape of a petal. So don't worry about it. Don't waste your time worrying about that. Just get the basic shape down. And normally I would use flower formers that I have at work to dry these petals in their shape, but I did not have those with me, so I just kind of made do with what I have. And I have this deviled egg tray that I do use to make petals, dry petals with quite often. But with this wafer paper technique, they're going to be wet. So if I had done it just on the glass of the tray, they would stick and never come off. So I did use some cling wrap to be a buffer between the petal and then the glass, so that it will dry in that shape but will release easily. And this is just warm water that I have on the side here, and I just added some food coloring to it. I started with ivory and then I added a little brown, just a little bit, and I'm just dipping them into the water and then placing them on that tray to dry. And remember to keep that tip of the petal where you're holding on to it, keep that from getting wet if you can, because that's gonna help you get these petals wrapped around the floral wire. Otherwise, you're gonna be dealing with crispy, crunchy wafer paper, and it's hard to get them on those wires. Now, I put them to the side to dry for probably about 2 hours with a fan on them. It really doesn't take that long. That's part of the reason I like the wafer paper now. Well, I'm on a little bender with wafer paper. I usually used to do the gum paste flowers, and I still do, but this is more trendy, and actually they're a little faster to do, I have found, because they dry faster. They don't take overnight to dry. And just go ahead and pull them off of your plastic wrap very, very gingerly. You want to be gentle with that. And then cut your floral wire down to size. This is 22 gauge, I believe. I think it's 22 gauge. I didn't want a real thick wire because, well, the wafer paper is not heavy. You don't need that heavy duty wire, so it's more of a medium to light gauge. And just use a little water. Don't use too much water on your wafer paper or it will completely disintegrate. Just a little bit of water, like dip it in the water and then dab it on a towel before you put it on the wafer paper, and just wrap that end around your wire. Now, yes, they do look like they're kind of cattywampus to the side, but that's the glory of the floral wires, and you can bend it later to the shape you need it. And now this is how I'm making my wrap. I'm just using some cake dummies that I have, and yes, they are stained. They have been used and abused and loved. But I am just putting some more plastic wrap around those dummies. It will stick to itself if you wrap it all the way around. You don't have to worry about taping it down. Just wrap it all the way around so that it sticks to itself. And I'm just lining a sheet pan with some towels to hold those in place. And again, I'm just using water with some food coloring. Now I added a little bit more at a time, a little bit by bit, and because I wanted to get the right color, but it was turning out a little bit too yellow. So I did end up putting a little dab of brown in there as well. I'm taking a full-sized piece of wafer paper and cutting it in half. And you just run it through the water and quickly drape it right over your foam cake dummy. Don't worry so much about how it's laying, just get it on there. Because abstract, again, it doesn't really matter. You're just going for a basic texture and kind of a design element to it. And then I'm using a little bit darker water with some brown food coloring, a little bit darker, just to kind of bring out some highlights in that texture. Just dab the color on, and then use another brush, dip it into your original water, because it's lighter, and kind of tap those hard edges of that color down a little bit. You're just kind of blending it in a little bit, I guess is a better way to put it. Now put those to the side next to a dryer to dry out again, like the petals. But this time you're not going to dry them all the way. You're not going to dry the wrap all the way. I'll explain that later. But for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap our cake in some fondant. And I just marbled a little bit of ivory in this. Doesn't have to be completely blended in because there's a textured look to this cake anyways. Now I'm just picking it up after I cut it down to size and wrapping it around. That's just because I've done this a few hundred times. I wouldn't suggest doing that the first time. I would wrap it around a dowel or a rolling pin and then move it up and wrap it around there. I have other cakes that I have done the same technique to that I can try to link here so you can see how I do that. And then I'm just using my long ruler and an X-Acto knife to cut off that excess and just kind of rub those ends together. And pop any air bubbles that you get. You inevitably will get some air bubbles, especially when you're doing the pick it up and wrap it around method. Air gets trapped in there. And just use your needle, poking it in at an angle, and push that air out through the hole. And then just smooth it down. You'll never know it was there. Now, you'll see, these wraps are not completely dry. They're about 3/4 of the way dry. And I did that on purpose because the first time I tried this, I dried it all the way and I had a lot of trouble trying to wrap it around the cake because once it's dry, it gets kind of crunchy a little bit and it wants to curl up on itself. So I thought I would try not drying it all the way, which means you kind of have to nudge this saran wrap off a little bit, but that's okay. This way, at least it is pliable and will wrap around the shape of the cake without so much trouble. Now I'm going to go ahead and this is a combination of some piping gel and some water, because if you add water to some piping gel, that makes the water not melt your wafer paper. Just make sure it's kind of a thicker consistency. This sounds gross, but it's kind of the consistency of snot. It's the only way I can think of to describe it. And then pick up your wafer paper wrap and just wrap it around. I did different pieces, different sizes and different pieces because, well, you can't dry it on its side if it's all the way around your cake dummy. It'll stick to whatever it's laying on. So I did it in separate pieces. And if you're having spots that aren't wanting to stick, go ahead and put a little bit more of that piping gel and water mixture on there. And also, since the wafer paper is still a little tacky on the underneath side, that will help it stick to the cake, to the fondant as well. Don't do this on buttercream, because if buttercream sweats a little bit, it's going to melt your wafer paper. This is one of those techniques you really can't do on buttercream so well. And then I went all the way around the back and did the same thing. And I wanted to make sure I had some pieces sticking up over that top edge, just to give it more of that rustic, kind of rough look to it. I'm really in this whole wanting this textured, rough, natural texture lately. I need to come up with some designs that are a little bit more pretty instead of abstract. We'll see what I come up with. But you guys seem to like these, so I kind of stick with those. And once your petals are dry, go ahead and use your floral tape. You just rip off a piece of it and stretch it to activate the glue in it. And just kind of wrap it around your wires. Now I did some single petals, just left them alone. And then I did some mainly groupings of 2. And then I did a grouping of 3. Now these are not supposed to look like flowers necessarily. To me, they kind of look more like leaves. And yes, I did not do any accent colors. I wanted this to be more of a monochromatic overall color scheme, but with some varying depths of color within that. I thought that that would bring out the texture better without being too confusing to your eyes. Now, if you have trouble getting through that wafer paper to stick your wires into with your flowers, just go ahead and use a toothpick and kind of put a little hole in it and then stick your flowers in there. I didn't have to use anything else to attach these. They stayed in there all by themselves. And I kind of wanted to go with just like a flow up and to the side. That's kind of my favorite movement, I think, with cakes is kind of at a diagonal. So there it is. I hope you guys gave it a try. And if you do, please send me pictures to Instagram under the same name, Sophisticakes by Mary. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my video. And if you'd like to watch some other videos, go ahead and click on the link to one of these other videos shown here. And if you would like to check out my other social media, I am on Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Sophisticakes by Mary. And please take the time to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload another video. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next tutorial.